So, some of you may subscribe to the New York Times, and if you do, you may also get their one of their daily newsletters. One of them is called The Morning, and I opened mine up this morning, and I found an article, the lead article there, that was really relevant to what it is I want to talk about this morning. So the article is an introduction to a year-long study that the New York Times has conducted about religious affiliations and attitudes that Americans have. And you're probably familiar with the notion of none, N-O-N-E, which has been popularized, which is, more and more Americans simply don't have any religious affiliation. Well, the Times study, the survey they did this last year, indicates that that may be waning, and there is a new desire on the part of many Americans to rediscover religion. And that is what this article is about. And the sentence that I picked out of it that I thought summarized at least the introduction to this study, which will probably be published several times throughout the year in the main part of the newspaper. It says that people want stronger communities, more meaningful rituals, and spaces to express their spirituality. I found that that was something that spoke to me and perhaps speaks to many of you here. More meaningful lives, I think that's one of the reasons that we're here. More meaningful rituals, I'm not sure. But a place to express their spirituality, I would say yes, depending upon how we define the word spiritual. But I think that if we were able to not worry about the words that are used here, but the ideas that are behind them, I think it really very much speaks to why it is that I think at the very best, people come to the Ethical Society, choose to see who we are, and then choose to remain. And I think that the words that are used here that may be off-putting initially, I have found in my experience in, I don't know, what is it now, 55 years here at the Ethical Society, that the longer people are here, the more comfortable they are with using those words, because it's been redefined in a way that is consistent with their intellectual integrity. That was today's New York Times. Now, last week, our speaker, Adam Israel, spoke about the brokenness of life and indicated or referred to the fact that this wasn't something new. It's been true almost as long as people have been able to reflect upon their place in society. And what is meant by the brokenness in life is that there's a disconnect often between who we are as individuals, what is important to us, what we stand for, what our values are, how we want to live our lives with integrity, and the larger world that we participate in. Seldom do we find that there is a total consistency between those two things. This has been true for, as I said, 2,500 years that people have recognized this. The idea of the brokenness in the world has been consistently used in Christian circles and to a lesser degree also within Jewish circles. But it is a notion that has really been consistent in Western religions. We don't use that here so much, although the founder of the ethical movement, Felix Adler, founded in 1876, towards the end of his life really began to focus more, was more focused on this notion of the disconnect between who it is that we say we want to be and the world in which we live. How do you put those two things together? And essentially there are three approaches that we could take. One is drop out. You really can't stand this world. Disconnect, go off the grid. Go live a survivalist life, or find a commune that is off the grid, that is all those people whose values you share. That's one, drop out. The other is forget your values and participate. Who are you anyhow to think that you're better than everybody else? So forget all the things that I think have been my values to me, forget my sense of integrity, and I'll simply participate fully. I want to be in business, I'll cheat. I want to succeed in business, I'll cheat. I want to do whatever it is that I'm supposed to do according to the lights of the larger society, that's what I'll do. And the third approach is something that's in between, which is to figure out what is truly most important to us and try to find those communities that more or less support who we are. And then when we participate in the larger society, try to figure out what compromises we're willing to make that don't totally undermine our integrity. And then within that context, try to live in a way that persuades other people that what we hold is in fact more important and more valuable than whatever the larger values may be in terms of acquisition, success, monetary, materialist things. So those are the three approaches that were outlined last week. So what do we do here at a society, an ethical society? This Sunday morning is really the mainstay of who we are, if you like, the tent pole that holds up the tent. This is, if people want to know who we are, this is really the place to come. If you really want to experience fully who we are, it really is in the Sunday morning community that we have created. So what do we do here? Do we present a lecture or do we present a sermon? What is the nature of what it is that we do from our platform? The past year, we've been doing an internal review of Sunday morning meetings that are presented not by our own members, not by the leader, but by outsiders. And there are 9 people who I think represent a cross-section of our society who respond every week to what did you think of the topic? What did you think of how the topic was presented? And what is clear to me, and we're not finished with the year yet, is that there's no consistency between the 9 people. Sometimes what somebody thinks is wonderful, intellectually stimulating, somebody else says, oh, who needs that lecture? It was a workshop. The other time, somebody would love what they consider something to be really very moving. Other people said, who needed it? Didn't have any intellectual substance. There was no floor to it, no intellectual floor to it. So we have a variety of responses to what goes on here from this platform. Some people say, I learned something. Other people say, I was emotionally moved. My own view is that whatever happens here, you should leave the morning feeling more uplifted than you did before you walked in. You should feel more empowered than before you came. You should feel more connected to the world and feel more responsible for your life than before you walked in. And that needs to be recharged on some regular basis, which is why we meet every week. There's a sign behind me. It says Deed Before Creed, and we present that as one of our leading notions here, meaning that what you do is more significant than what you say you believe. That is, our behavior expresses who we are as a person. So what are our deeds? Our deeds, if you look at how we write our history, and also the Sundays that we have, other than the ones that are presented usually by other ethical leaders and some of our own members, the deed that is often expressed is from a social activist point of view. That is, what are the social ills in the world that we think need to be addressed? And that is what we present week after week. So it used to be when peace was the major, or war was the major concern in the society, a common question that sort of was inferred week after week when people talk to each other is, what did you do today to bring about world peace? That was it. That was the charge. That was what was wrong with the world at the time. What did you do? Adler had a critique, as Felix Adler had a critique of those people who were first and foremost social activists. He himself was a social activist. He himself said that one of the reasons to found the ethical societies was to address the social ills of the late 19th century. But he had a critique, and the critique was of the unstinting benefactor. That is, the person who exacts undetected homage, who is capable of behaving with almost inconceivable hardness and even cruelty to others. That is, to address yourself to the social ills, but then turn around and have a hard heart to the people who are next to you. And in fact, exact cruelty in trying to bring about a better world misses the point of what we're trying to do in an ethical society. Is the disconnect between the personal and the social that is a problem. And that is one of the things that Felix Adler and here, ever since in an ethical society, we try to bring together. That is to try to heal the broken world, how we participate in such a way in the broken world that we don't become broken ourselves or disconnect so we become irresponsible. So it is not only what we believe, it's also how we do it. It is putting together the head, our intellectual integrity, our hand, that is the deed before the creed, but also must include the heart, that is how we do it, and the kind of people we are that is expressed through our character. It's a personal attitude that I'd like to focus on here, which is there are certain attitudes I think that would be incumbent upon us to become part of our personality, to be fully immersed in what it is to be an ethical humanist. And that is to have in mind always that there's always more to know. Whatever we think we know fully and completely, we need to take a step back. There's also something we don't know. What this means is also that there's someone who can do it better than we can. We're not so indispensable wherever we find ourselves that we think that if we can't do it, nobody else can. This is a kind of arrogance, a lack of humility, so to speak. And finally, I would say an attitude for us to have is everyone has something to teach me. Everyone has something to teach. Even the people that I find to be horrible, they do have something to teach us. The things that we most disagree with, in there's something for us to learn. Not easy to do. I think this is the real challenge. It's easier for us to think about the social ills of the world and identify what needs to be done. It's harder to think about our own behavior and what it is that we need to do to become better people. So what we have on a Sunday morning very often is talking about social ills. Why do we do that? It's because it is easier to find people in the community who aren't members, who are doing something really of significance in the community to address a social ill. And we want to hear what it is that they're doing. We want to hear their analysis. It is much more difficult to find somebody, a speaker, who will then address us on a more personal level. It's not impossible, but we want to find somebody who can do that in a way that is not moralistic. The problem with addressing personal ethics, if you don't have a comprehensive idea of what it means to be an ethical person, can often be reduced to a sermon that really has no intellectual basis and becomes moralistic. It is like telling you this is how you ought to be in very specific ways. If you're not this way, you're a bad person. So in addition to the Sunday morning platform programs that we have. We have another program in the society that's called the colloquy. And the colloquy was designed to address the kinds of things I'm talking about, that is, our personal attitudes, how we conduct ourselves in an everyday way. That is, the behavior. How do we in fact behave? What it is that we do on a daily basis with our friends, with our families, with our colleagues, with us being citizens in this world. And it's done in such a way, I think, that prevents it from being moralistic. And it is, I think that it isn't moralistic because it asks an open-ended question. And we have people who there, or the rule is you cannot be judgmental. You don't say whether you agree or disagree with somebody else. It is what this means to you. And I'll just give you, I'll do it randomly, from this book called Spelling God with 2 O's. If you don't have a copy of it, I'll give you one. Make sure you get it before you leave. But these are some of the things that we do in the colloquy, and then there are always a question. I just opened it up randomly, I'll do 3. Question under listening. What helps to make you a better listener? Randomly, generosity. In what ways are you a generous person? Another one, randomly, solving. What is your preferred way to solve problems? These are open-ended questions. They lead often, I think, to tremendous insights on the part of the people who participate. And my hope would be that people would stay with that question throughout the week and continue to ask themselves that same question. Because the questions being open-ended, there is no end to answering the question. What about our institutional attitudes? These are the personal attitudes. On an institutional level, here's what I would hope, how we would behave here when we get together. That we would always be welcoming to people who we have not seen before, people who may be here for the first time, that people who even we know perhaps only on Sunday mornings, that at least we say hello and interact with them, and people who we see only occasionally go out of our way to find out who they are, what is going on with them. I'm hoping that the attitude that we have on a Sunday morning is something that is serious, but not somber. Something that is rational, but not cold. Something that is open, that is, our ideas are always open-ended, but not empty. That we are focused on ourselves and ethical behavior and what it means to be an ethical person, how to make a better world, that we're focused, but we're not rigid. That we accept the truth, wherever that may take us. That we value intellectual integrity. At the same time, that we accept uncertainty. One of the ways of understanding who we are is to describe us as a religion of relations, meaning we are of this world and we are in this world. We begin with an anthropology, not with a theology, and our anthropology is that we are social beings. We are born into families, into cultures, into civilizations, and we are a product of this particular time in history. But what about our behavior? What does that in fact mean? Well, one of the things that it means is, I'll get there. I only have 2 pages of notes, and it's unbelievable that I could mix that up. However, I know my limitations, and I do. I want to go back. Before I get to that, let me return to who it is that we are in some of our definitions. One is that we would not be who we are if we were not involved in the world, if we were not addressing the social ills of the world in which we live. If we didn't, we wouldn't be any more than the cowardly lion, and we could change our name to the Cowardly Lion Non-Ethical Humanist Society. That is, we have to have the courage of our convictions. What do our bylaws say about who we are? Well, the bylaws say that we must have an ethical action committee. We wouldn't be an ethical society without an ethical action committee. Now, that obviously is not true of many other religions. If they get involved in civic engagement, that's kind of an add-on. For us, it isn't an add-on. For us, it is essential to our definition, to our identity. It is, the purpose of it is to help engage members in social action. Doesn't mean that we need to do it as a society, as an institution, but it does mean that we need to encourage our members to engage in it wherever they find that it is most productive. But then it also stipulates something else in the bylaws, and it says, the leader shall perform the usual pastoral functions. What does that mean? What are the usual pastoral functions? Well, when I was interviewed to become a leader after having spent 2 years in Kenya and had read a little bit about the Ethical Society, I was sure I knew what it was. And then in the interview, they asked me, well, how do you feel about officiating at funerals? And I was really taken aback. You often think, oh, I wish I had the wits to be able to respond intelligently at the time. I don't remember what it is that I mumbled, but probably something like, I don't know. It was almost the deal killer for me, which is officiate at a funeral. It's not what I wanted. I wanted to address the social ills of the world. What did officiating at a funeral have to do with any of this? But there it is in our own bylaws, that the leader shall perform the usual pastoral functions. Again, the public face that we have from the very beginning. Felix Adler identified what he called the labor question. That was the burning social ill of his day. I think it may still be for us. It was social justice for the working class. And we've continued that tradition here in our society. Just to name some of the people who presently are continuing to carry that out are Sue and Ken Pfeiffer, Pat Spencer, Judy Rosemarin, Jim Lepresti, others in other venues, and I'm sorry if I left anybody out who really is very committed at this time. Also, how the building gets used. We have opened up this building to many community organizations that were just beginning and could not find another home. Nobody wanted them, or they couldn't afford the rent. We opened our doors to them. To mention two, World Hunger Year, the organization started by Harry Chapin, which now has morphed into Long Island Cares, the largest food pantry on Long Island. World Hunger Year is begun by Harry Chapin. Its first office was here at the Ethical Society, where several people who are sitting in this room here and probably online as well were intimately involved with that at the very beginning. The other thing I want to mention was one of the groups that we opened our doors to was the non-traditional jobs for women. How they found us, I have no idea. But I remember one morning, these were not all of them were tough-looking women, but many of them were. And women would be walking in and out of here with tool belts and hammers hanging and whatever else. And one morning I was in the leader's study over here, and they were meeting. Their office was upstairs. Somebody comes downstairs saying, Arthur, please come upstairs. I go up there. I said, what's the problem? They said, there's a mouse in our room, And there, standing on a desk, was a woman with her tool belt, with her, I don't know, but many of the women who were the first in their industry started here with that group, including the first, I think, woman detective in the Nassau County Police Department. But what about the pastoral aspects? Well, I visited people in jails, which wasn't easy. I wanted to visit someone, not during the visiting hours when there was a long line outside in the cold, waiting to go visit somebody who was in jail. I wanted to go in as their pastor, their minister, whatever you want to call me. The problem was they had no indication that ethical culture or ethical humanism was a religion. One person who was actually pretty active in our membership was there, and he was listed as a Catholic. I said, I want to go visit so-and-so. Now, who are you? I said, I'm his religious leader. And they said, well, are you a priest? You don't look like a priest. I said, I'm not a priest. Why do you think I'm a priest? Well, he put down his religion as Catholic because he wanted to put down something. And ethical humanism wasn't there. I encountered the same thing at hospitals. Ethical humanism was not listed as an option for people who went in as patients. I tried to do my best to get that changed. Whether I was successful or not, I really don't know. So, in my role, I visited many people in hospitals. I officiated at many, many funerals and memorial services. More than 1,000 weddings, mainly for people who were not members of the society but had no place else to go. We performed welcoming ceremonies for babies. And more recently, Newsday has had a column called Asking the Clergy, and they periodically, once a year, sometimes even more than that, will call the society to get a comment from the leader or from me if Richard is not available. So what is a leader? Is a leader somebody who's meant to be a model activist? Is a leader a teacher? Is the leader a pastor? It's a very peculiar term we have, leader, and I can't think of a single ethical culture leader who has ever been happy with that title, including Felix Adler, who did not give that title to himself. That was something that was done without his knowing, when in New York State they created a special law for the Ethical Culture Society so that he was able to officiate at weddings. It never said that it was a religion, and the lawyer needed to come up with a title, came up with the title. Up until then, all of the people who subsequently became leaders were called lecturers. And one of the active leaders today has now given up on the term leader, and he's gone back to calling himself a teacher. What do we want? It's hard to know. You might say we want all of that, except some people can't stand the spiritual part, and some people don't think we're overly intellectual. So we try to do all of these things. As I said, our anthropology is that we are born into families. None of us are self-made. We are largely shaped by others. And then we interact with the world around us, and we help to reshape ourselves to some extent. So we need to be appreciative of all that's been given to us. And we need to have our strong convictions, but always be open to be challenged. We exhort, we lecture, we explicate, we dissect, we take action, but also we need to offer ways to cultivate our inner lives, our ethical character. We need to offer guidance to develop the habits of ethical living. So I offer suggestions. They're never mandates. They're things to think about, ones that are important to me. If I were to start all over again, I perhaps would consider putting these in the bylaws. Here are 4 things. Stipulating a percentage of one's income to be given to a cause of your own choosing. When surveys have done of religions, typically the groups that are most generous in their contributions tend to be on the fundamentalist and on the orthodox side. It also tends to be that they give most of their money to their own religion. So but I do think the idea that you are responsible to give away some of your income, some of your wealth to others is critical. So I would make it, could talk about what the percentage might be, but some percentage of your income to some cause of your own choosing. I would also have some kind of requirement that our members give a number of hours devoted to volunteer work. That might be within the society, might be outside of the society. Again, of your own choosing and how you might define what volunteer work is. My third stipulation would be setting aside a period each day for self-reflection. For some people, that might be meditation. For other people, it might be answering the questions that I have in the colloquy. It might be something else. It doesn't matter. You find what it is that works for you. But set aside part of each day for self-reflection. And then finally, on an institutional level, it would be that we begin every meeting that we have, business meeting, Sunday morning meetings, discussion groups, it wouldn't matter, that we start every one of the meetings with a period of silence. We don't jump into business. We take time to recognize that we've moved from that larger world that we participate in into something that is much more focused and intimate, to remind ourselves that there's a certain way behaving with one another that often doesn't get expressed elsewhere. Further ideas. What to do. Take another's hand. Lend an ear. Provide a shoulder. Sing together, simply for the joy of it. I'm always thinking of a comment of William James, which is, I don't sing because I'm happy because I sing. Make life less difficult for one another. A phrase from one of George Eliot's novels that I'm particularly fond of. Make life less difficult for one another. Be part of a fellowship of common seekers. And walk humbly in the footsteps of ancestors. As guardians of the future we'll never see. As protectors of the earth, which we all must inhabit. We live in especially dangerous times, especially challenging times, difficult times. We have to go inside deeper, perhaps, than we've ever thought we would need to do in order to understand ourselves better, to find the courage to do what we know needs to be done. I don't have any illusions that everything must work out for the good, or that we will ever be free from frustration, from pain, or from sorrow. We live with uncertainty and incompleteness. So we do what we can, what we must, with whatever little we have. This is the way of ethical humanism. It has been the way of the life of all humans for a very long time. In 1854, in the United States, cholera killed thousands of people, 1,500 alone in Chicago. It was so devastating in Providence, Rhode Island, that for the next 30 years, it was known there as the year of cholera. There was despair and there was panic in the land. And it was that year that Stephen Foster, who most of us will remember maybe from some of the children's songs that we sang, wrote a song which is his most recorded, not necessarily the most sung, but the one that is most recorded. And the part of the lyrics go, "Let us pause in life's pleasures and count its many tears, while we all sup sorrow with the poor. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hard times, come again no more." This is not a song of lamentation, as I understand it, but a song of encouragement and pointing us in a direction that is the proper one.